Prose and Comms.
Welcome to Prose and Comms Engagement Unplugged. I'm Brian Rowley.
And I'm Laura Smith.
And today we're actually talking about a very hot topic and one that everyone seems to have a lot of feelings about. Return to office versus hybrid versus remote. This discussion is actually especially nuanced for marketing teams because return to office has become a bigger conversation about culture, trust, collaboration, creativity, and actually how good ideas happen. So we're going to get into what marketing teams actually need to do great work, whether they're in the office, remote, or actually somewhere in between. But before we get into whether in-person, remote, or hybrid is better, it's probably worth thinking about why this conversation still feels so personal. And I don't know about you, Laura, but I mean, it is one that's actually very personal for me. And one that I look at and say, you know, there's extremes on either side. There's something that sort of sits in the middle. For me, I've always been of the mindset, work wherever you want to work, as long as the work gets done.
Yes. I think that has been obviously, pre-COVID. We just did what we did because that's all we knew to do, which is go to the office, travel, do all the stuff. I think that now since then, and I've been fully remote since then, my past job and now this one, there's so many benefits to it that I think, and I agree with you, Brian, like I shouldn't have to look at somebody in the face all day long to make sure that I know they're doing their job. Because ideally, there is trust, and trust is a big part of this conversation. There's trust that people are managing their time and their workload appropriately based on set expectations and goals, et cetera, et cetera. So I was always of the mindset, like I could never, like one of my sisters, she worked from home before COVID. And I remember thinking like, oh, this book has definitely perks. I mean, you could pick up your kid from school, you could do these things, but I couldn't imagine it because I'm such another word I hate, people person. But I love to be around people. I have the energy of people, all of that. Then I'm like, oh, I definitely think the office thing and being in Boston and all that really like would work for me. Well, then, come COVID and that's all you knew. It's all you had to learn to do. It became easy and very much like, oh no, it does work better for me and point in my life with the child and blah, 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 blah. So I think I can see where the people had skepticism or could be like, I could never do it before. But now it's so much part of like culture where people have found the better balance and the ways in which they can self-manage without needing to be around people all the time.
Yeah, I think, for some, it is about the connection. I think it's about collaboration. I think it's, just feeling like, having that camaraderie that exists like through the office. But when you think about it, like how much time was wasted with someone who was standing over your desk or someone who, grabbed you at, the water cooler, right? Or in the kitchen or something like that and was like taking time away. But I also, for this conversation, and I don't know that I have opinions on this, but my opinions also move towards the side where there are also a lot of people who do work remote that take advantage.
100%. There's 100% reason that goes back to that trust factor. There are
100%.
people that aren't, yeah. And I think that's where, going back to the collaboration piece though, Brian, like, I think I'm going to call BS on that being like the reason when companies say this or leaders say that. Like, I really don't, I think you can collaborate virtually. I think some collaboration in person may be more effective, but it really comes down to about maybe the real estate they need to use or the control they want to, take back with having to like see people in their seats and feeling like they're, okay, I'm paying people to do their jobs. I'm watching them do their jobs. I think it's like, it's the trust factor. Like, I don't think people are bringing people together for collaboration. I think they're doing it for these other reasons, which is kind of where it makes me feel a little icky because you shouldn't need to do that if you had trust in your employees or, whatever. Obviously, I guess if you're paying rent in a building, you want people in there, but I think it's about balancing it and giving people the flexibility. I think flexibility is huge, that if there is an office space, people could have the choice to go into it and people find it to be more productive if that's what they find, and others may not. So how do you, that's where I think all this controversy is coming with like the hybrids and what days some people are in, and my own teammates in those days, and is it really productive if none of my teammates are in those days? So I think I think people are struggling a lot.
Well, the hybrid model always I found to be interesting. When companies started to say, you need to be in the office on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, it was like, okay, so let me just make sure I understand. We're coming back to the office because of collaboration, but the people that I would collaborate with are not in the office on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And does that mean on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I don't need to be collaborative? I can just sort of be my own, like, it didn't make any sense, right? Because I think the way that we should have moved, and a lot of companies have, and I give them a lot of credit for it, was collaboration is about getting together. And, you and I are in very different parts of the US, right? Our team is spread across the US, but we always find ways to actually come together on a regular basis, collaborate on ideas, get things done with the tools that are available to us. So I think you have to be smart about which tools you're putting in place in order to make people effective in a remote work environment. And I think you also have to understand that you have to understand the employees enough to know, like, maybe there's someone who does need that connection more often. And so you reach out to them a little more than you would somebody else because they do require that touch point, right? So I think you have to understand what you're trying to do, but I don't think that collaboration is any more effective in person than it can be remotely. I just think it depends on, again, understanding the people who are part of the team.
Yeah, I think being together in person intentionally, right? Like do that with intention. And we do that, like for us, our team, we do a quarterly in-person session. So, and obviously throughout the year in between those, people are seeing each other in different other ways and travels and all that. So I think we found last year when we did skip a quarter meeting, it did kind of set the team off on a kind of a negative path. Like it
was a definite negative path. Yeah, right. For sure.
It was like without that time together, things kind of spiraled. And so while we thought it was a harmless kind of switch just because of crazy schedules, et cetera, that really translated into, oh, no, we can't do that because people do need that in-person time at certain and intentional points in the year. So I think to be fully remote, which is what we pretty much are, you need to carve out time, budget, all that to be able to do that in person, to have an effective team.
I would agree. I think there are definite benefits to being able to sit across the table from someone, sit next to someone, share a meal together, right? Like being able to have, I don't know what just happened there.
I thought you said share mail. I'm like, what kind of mail are they both getting?
Share a meal together. I think those things are actually, I think they're beneficial because you get to know people versus Laura's responsible for this. You get to know you as a person, which I do think that interaction and that personal interaction is important. But I think your point around creating that flexibility and having that level of trust is key. But let's talk about the trust factor for a second, because as I pointed out, there are people that are not great at the remote work environment and spend half the day maybe cleaning their house or running errands or preparing for dinner or doing those things. So how do you manage that?
Luckily, I don't clean my house or make dinner, so I'm not one of them. No, I think that's hard. And you've said in our own organization, there may be some parameters and things built around culturally how we think about managing teams' time to better serve all employee types. Because some people and they might admit it, they do have difficulty working individually behind a screen all day long in the same place without people around them. So I think we have to think about, though, the needs of all employee types. But yes, I think trust it's hard because you want to and should trust your employees, people who you bring into the organization, people who you kind of have them adapt the culture of the organization, of the team. All things should be kind of traveling in the same, direction. But you're not always going to get that. So it requires managers to have to keep a pulse and have open discussions, honest discussions around if there is deliverables aren't being met, meetings aren't being attended to, things like that, then it has to be addressed because that's not okay. aren't paying people to do the dishes and make dinner.
Yeah. I used to work with someone who used to say, the reason that they wanted their employees to be back in the office was because they had somewhat of a level of security that the person was doing their job if they saw them walk past and they could look out their office door and see them sitting at a desk. And I was like, you know what? Here's the reality of it. If you have a bad employee, whether they're sitting in front of you or they're working remote, they're a bad employee. Doesn't matter. It might be a little more challenging to be able to prove that they are. But if you know that and that's your gut instinct, then I promise you, your gut is probably telling you the truth. That's not the right employee. And again, it's not for everyone. There are people who work remote who will tell you, I don't like working remotely. It's just not set up for them. I mean, for me, I've been doing this, 20 years I've been remote. And I've managed teams that are remote for 20 years. So for me, again, and I say this to our team all the time, make sure the work gets done and we won't have an issue. But if work isn't getting done, there's plenty of tools, whether you're remote or not, or in person, that you can use to be able to tell that. But I think that's the trust factor. Let's talk a little bit more around, especially in the marketing roles, when is it really effective? We've talked about brainstorming, right? So is brainstorming more effective when you're in a one-on-one scenario and then you take whatever you got from that and you go and figure out your piece to that? Or is it okay to brainstorm in a remote environment? Just some of those examples, I think it would be helpful.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because you would think that brainstorming together would be the way that you'd want to really bring a marketing or creative team. That'd be more effective. And then kind of executing alone, going back home or into your remote office and executing. But I read research that shows the opposite, that brainstorming can be done virtually and actually executing together may be more effective. And I didn't dig too far into it, but in my mind, I'm thinking, and Joey, obviously you're creative, so it'll be interesting. But once you're actually building something out and doing more with it, you might want to collaborate in those situations. You're seeing it real time. You're oh, actually we could move this or create this differently. And so I can see value in that. I think we've had to learn how to brainstorm remotely. So while it can be effective, obviously, but it was just interesting to see the research switch because or say that it's the opposite of what most people think, because I think most people are bringing people in to do the brainstorms and do those collaborative sessions.
For me, I think creative collaboration is easier in person, but I don't think that outweighs the benefits personally from for working from home. I just don't. Yes, it is a little bit better and easier because it's quicker. There's no delay, when you're speaking to someone in a group. For instance, if I'm editing a video with somebody or kind of giving some oversight to a project that's going on, I can kind of sit with them and see what they're doing and suggest edits on the fly instead of having a bulleted list that I send over to them and then they take it and implement those edits there. So that real-time collaboration is easier in person, but the pros of being able to work from home for me far outweigh that extra benefit.
Yeah, I definitely think some things move faster. We just had our team together, and being able to sit across the table from each other, have a conversation about a project that we're working on and have everybody's input live right there versus you start a conversation, you're like, oh, hold on a second, so-and-so's missing from the conversation, so I got to pull them into it. And, oh, wait a second, that's someone else, I need to pull them into it. So there are definitely situations where things do move faster when you're in person but I don't know that is something that always has to be the case. I think there are ways to be able to do it. Again, it's awareness. If you have all the right people that are part of a project together, whether they're in person or remote, you can accomplish the same thing, in my opinion. You just have to be aware of what voices are missing from the table when you're trying to accomplish things. And I think that is how you make that better.
But that's a good example, Brian, because last week or 2 weeks ago when we were together, we kind of got a business update that kind of impacted a lot of things that were going on from some of our projects. They're an active project. So our team was able to pivot together around a table, getting, having us review, getting approvals real time. That was very efficient and helpful
Yes.
because we could talk through it. And like, what does this make sense? That makes sense, you know? So like, that was a moment it definitely stuck with me of like, oh, like glad we're together for this. And this really shows this integrated team working quickly and effectively together real time, where that would have taken a little bit of like, get so-and-so on the phone, you know, like what you just said. So there's no doubt there's benefits. I think, you know, like for us in Boston, Fidelity just announced that they're requiring 5 days a week. Everyone goes back. I don't know when that starts, soonish. And I have friends who work there and people who do like the hybrid thing. But I don't know what, you know, yes, they have property. Yes, they're paying rent. So I'm sure that's something to do with that. But I'd be interested to see, you know, some people will only look for remote jobs if they're so used to being remote or hybrid. That is now full time back in an office. It's just so much controversy. Of course, you know, all the local people are talking about it and it's like, oh my God, how dare they? But my sister in New York City, she runs an agency there and they've been back in at least 3 days a week for like ever. And that is a rule and that is how they manage the team. And it's very, very structured and managed. And that's like a more of a creative agency type. So it's happening and it'll just be interesting to see, you know, the market's not great. Are people going to just do it? Or are people going to start to really look for jobs that where they find balance? Those people that do want the balance more than needing the structured in office environment.
Yeah, I would be surprised if you really ever see people go back to that fully in person with, you know, there's a lot of companies that have said they're going to do that. There's a lot of companies who have tried to do it and then they've had to back off on it because employees will say, you know what, this isn't going to work for me. And this is not. I think the key to it is what you mentioned. And I think that is that you have remote work, but there are times when the expectation is people need to be in the office, whether it's a key meeting or something that we're trying to do, and it's very structured. It's not just pulling people back in for the sake of pulling them in. It's purposeful, and I think that, you know, when I look at it, you know, especially, you know, folks that work like in climates during the winter where like travel to and fro could take a couple of hours because of weather impacts and all that stuff. People working remote, they're at their desk, right? They didn't have to go anywhere. So they're more productive in that environment. And I don't know about you, but, you know, even in the world that we live in right now, I'm more inclined after, you know, I have dinner to sit down and just quickly look at something, versus if I had to drive for 2 hours, sometimes it's like, oh, I just need to get away from this, right? And I'll pick it back up in the morning, where I think you're seeing a little bit more of that flexibility. I mean, it's definitely an interesting conversation, and it's definitely one that I think people have tried to be forceful in the approaches, and I don't think it's always worked. And quite honestly, I do think in order to have a good relationship with employees, I do think you have to have a level of trust, and you have to put the right parameters in there to be able to manage that environment. And, you know, also be willing to look at it and say, hey, you know what, we are a remote environment. If this environment doesn't work for you, then this might not be the right place for you. But one of the things that we didn't talk about, which is also, I think, a really big piece to it, is in a remote work environment, I also think you have access to different talent that you would have had access to if you had a specific work location. And I think it's a focus on getting the right people in the right seats to do the right job. And I do think remote work environments do a better job of being able to allow teams to be able to build that way.
Yeah, because then you're hiring for skill versus someone for skill and location. So it definitely opened up the aperture, you know, post-COVID, where people were like, wow. Or a lot of people like, I mean, Joey, you moved, right? I mean, like you can move and still be part of that organization. You're still being a valuable contributor. So it does give people that, again, it goes back to flexibility. And I think right now in today's world and society, and we just want flexibility, whether that be because you have a family, whether it be because you don't have a family and you want to travel more and other things are going on. But it all comes down to, is the work getting done? Is the work good work? And are people holding themselves accountable for their individual, you know, contributions and respecting their team members and communicating appropriately and all the things that kind of come with it. that's what matters, because if someone's not performing, whether they're in person or virtual, it doesn't matter. Then they're not performing. And I think we need to hold the bar at the same level, no different, for regardless of where they are, whether they're right next to us or if they're, 2 states away from us.
If you need them to be in person to judge whether or not they're being accountable to their work, I think you might need to be looking inward as a manager, right? So,
yeah, that's a great point.
Snap,
Yeah. I know. Look at Joey. Mic
snap.
drop. We're out. So listen, no, but I think the communication element to that, and I think the accountability piece are 2 very important ones. I mean, this is a conversation that could go on, forever. But because there's many different points.
But you know what I think, right? You know what I think we should do at some point, though, is get someone on here that fully believes that in the marketing role that in person is necessary. Just to have a good conversation
that would get
about
so
it.
heated. I
Right?
love it.
But I feel like it's us who are remote marketers with somebody who's a true believer in in-person marketing for reasons. Like, I'd love to hear their reasons and how that works differently. And then that we can kind of take the because we're not saying what we think is right. Obviously it works for us. And this is the company and the culture and the team we built and the structure we have in place. But obviously there are many companies who are doing it differently. And maybe some people are thriving in that and think that people do thrive. So I would love to get a counter opinion on this one.
Yeah. So if there's anyone out there that's listening who does believe that marketing teams should be in person, and that's a more effective way to manage that team and be more productive, reach out to us. We'd love to have you on the show so that we can have that point of view. But for us, we thank you for listening. And most importantly, if you like what you heard today, be sure to follow us.